Welcome to the video on Exam 2. I will walk through the draft of the test and give you an idea of what to study for and what to be prepared for. There's 24 multiple choice questions for a total of 48 points. Then there is 6 questions that are 2 points each, 4 questions that are 4 points each, 3 questions that are 6 points each, and 1 spectroscopy question at the end. So in terms of the multiple choice, be prepared to do Newman projections, both staggered and eclipsed, know about angle strain, know about the idea of cis and trans for both rings and double bonds. You'll also be required to do nomenclature, so be prepared to answer questions about alkenes, alkanes, and haloalkanes. Remember, double bonds and rings can be in any of those structures. You'll have to be able to name a compound that has a chirality center, so we need to determine R and S. You have to be able to name a cyclohexane molecule. Here's another question about Newman projections, staggered and eclipsed, and the kind of strain that goes along with those. You'll have to be able to determine the most stable conformation, both for Newman projections and for cyclohexane in the chair. And remember, for cyclohexane in the chair, we had that cheat sheet model where we could try to figure out axial, equatorial, axial, equatorial. And remember, the big groups always want to be equatorial. There's 4 questions in the multiple choice section that are matching. So I give you 2 compounds and you have to tell me how they are related, whether they are constitutional isomers, identical compounds, enantiomers, or diastereomers. In the next question, I give you a compound and you have to determine its enantiomer. You should be prepared to answer questions about optical activity and the rotation of plane polarized light. Hopefully by the exam you'll be able to determine and identify which compounds are nucleophiles or electrophiles. On this exam you'll have to know, in terms of energy diagrams, what an intermediate looks like, what a transition state looks like, how many steps are in a reaction, activation energy, energy of the overall reaction, endothermic, exothermic, and also in terms of the rate of a reaction, you'll have to know what that means and how we can speed that rate up or slow that rate down. So that's the gist of the multiple choice. And if I move now to the free response that are 2 points each, I have 6 questions here. The first 3 are nomenclature, and so you either have to draw a compound that I give you the name, or write the IUPAC name for a compound if I give you the structure. Please do not forget in any of these examples to include the stereochemistry designation at the beginning of the molecule, specifically cis or trans, R or S, and E or Z. Next, I give you a compound and you have to draw either the diastereomer or the enantiomer. Next question, you have to circle all of the compounds that are nucleophiles or electrophiles. And finally, I give you a big molecule and you have to identify all of the asymmetric centers that are in that molecule. Part 3 of the test, which is the free response, and these are 4 points each. The first question, I have mechanisms drawn with electron movement being indicated by arrows, and you have to tell me the name of the electron movement that's indicated by those arrows. For example, we had loss of a leaving group, proton transfer, nucleophilic attack, and rearrangement. So of those 4, you'll have to indicate what you observe in the question. In the next question, I give you a compound and you have to draw all of the stereoisomers and explain. In the next question, I give you an energy diagram, and from the information in the energy diagram, you'll determine which product is formed faster and or which product is more stable. So remember, we talked about kinetically and thermodynamically favored. The last 4-point question has to do with Newman projections. So you have to draw both the most stable and the least stable, looking down a certain bond of a certain compound. Next page, we have 3 questions that are 6 points each. The first question, I'm going to give you a chemical formula, and you'll have to draw the constitutional isomers that fall into certain categories as described in the question. In the next question, I give you a name of a cyclohexane molecule. You have to draw the flat ring and both chair conformations, and then indicate which chair is more stable and why. And in the last 6-point question, I ask you to calculate the delta H for a chemical reaction, and you will have access to the values from the table. And then the last question on the test is the spectroscopy question. I give you the molecular formula of the compound, the infrared spectrum, the carbon NMR spectrum, and I give you the proton NMR spectrum, and you have to solve the structure, and the actual structure is only worth a very small part of the points. It's an 8-point question. You have to calculate the degrees of unsaturation, and you have to label all 3 of the spectra for full credit. So you can get the answer totally wrong and still get most of the points. Or you can get the answer completely correct because you didn't label the spectra, lose many of the points. So for full credit on that one, you have to label each spectrum, calculate the degrees of unsaturation, and come up with a final structure. Okay, great. So I just wanted to give you some insight into what kinds of things you should be really studying for as we prepare for the exam this week. Okay, good luck.